podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Old Head podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Raji.
All right. So, I guess wanted to talk about there's a new movie, I guess. Well, I don't know. Yeah, still, I would say it's new. American Fiction, starring Jeffrey Wright, which is directed by, and I should say the brother's name or person's name. I don't particularly remember. I think it's brother in the vernacular sense that we would say that. Hold on here. Directed by Cord Jefferson, you know what I'm saying, and written by Cord Jefferson and Percival Everett. Percival Everett, I don't know a lot of his work, but a pretty prolific writer. Writes, I know a lot of like Western type joints, and but it's based on a book, Erasure, that he wrote. And I have a lot of thoughts about this movie and a lot of feelings about the movie and what the movie is about, but also what the movie tried to do. So, I'll open up by like actually tipping the ball to you to get, what are some of your first thoughts about American Fiction?
Yeah. A couple, man. One, I thought that one is a very good movie. So let me start there before I start opining. It's a very good movie. You should go see it if you haven't. It's now in cities across the country where it was, kind of limited run up until about 2 weeks ago, 2 Fridays ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to different places. And I think one thought about the movie I have is this: like, it shows the natural limits of Black excellence. And what I mean by that is it's a type of movie that says there's a successful author, or semi-successful. There's a successful writer. He has a sister who is a doctor. He has another brother who's a doctor. They, family from, the Boston area, have a beach house out in Cape Cod, right? And so all the things about this are the very things that if you were to look at and say, Black folks moving on up, right? It's almost like the conclusion of the Jeffersons, right? Like, this is a successful family with all the things that comes with that. And then you just see also the frailties of that concept, right? And it's not in a bad way, but it's the frailties of humanity. And no matter what your economic conditions are, there are still the frailties of a family. There are still these challenges that families have. And I thought it was really genius how they wrapped this very family story in kind of like this real funny shell.
Mm-hmm.
In the funny shell of the whole book and the culture, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I just wanted to, I fundamentally saw it as a family movie wrapped in other things, right? And it, because it was a limit of quote unquote Black excellence, it also was centering the fact of normalizing Black people being successful and seen on screen in ways other than acute suffering or dramatic success.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is very, very important, because I think that ties into the second part, that you only see Black people when it comes to acute suffering. But like while he's grappling with that, the personal reality was just very normalized suffering in a family and in a society, and how someone comes to grips with, you know, life and family secrets and, you know, connections and lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Monk's personal kind of connections and lack thereof as exercised kind of in his personal relationships and also his relationship to his art. So yeah, I thought it was that. I thought it was like one of the first times you've seen almost a Woody Allen-esque tale about black families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I say that because I'm a, his personal misgivings notwithstanding, I am a Woody Allen fan. Um, and so I thought it was really great to be able to see that on stage. And so I wanted to touch on the family stuff. I know we'll get into the kind of bigger book interaction and stuff like that, but I did think it was like a family movie wrapped in this like funny context.
It was good to see a film involving, I mean, like the primary dynamic of like hardship and challenge, you know what I mean, for Jeffrey Wright's character, for Monk, you know, is the reality of like what's happening with his family, preparing for and caring for an aging parent. Um, the whatever the dynamics, if you have siblings, you know, whatever the dynamics between you and your close siblings, which for a lot of people, you know, is probably one of their closer uh issue points of stress, than, you know, as much as, you know, the realities of the society, of our societal experience. Black folks don't often get to like be centered in a conversation where it's like, man, me and my brother don't get along, and we haven't got along since we were 18 because of something, and I don't totally understand it, or I'm estranged from, you know, this part of my family, and it's hard for me, or it's difficult, or, you know, my pops or my people's, you know, divorced, or they had, you know, he had a second life, he was doing some other things, and I didn't realize it, and other family members did, and there's resentments. Like, those things are not things that for our community are seen as operating space for like human stories. Even though
Right.
probably for most of us, we probably, more of us have, you know, interpersonal or interfamily, you know, dynamics, you know, in angst or pain or trauma or upsetness or whatever, you stress, even, let's just say stress, so we're not saying a whole bunch of words, that's rooted in, man, me and my cousin are the only two that need to figure out what's going to happen. You know, when my aunt can't stay in her house no more, and, you know, the cousin moved somewhere far, and I'm the one that's close, and I can't check on him, like, and you know, losing sleep over, like, getting calls, you know, the Tracy Ellis Ross character going like, both of y'all don't live here, so anything happens with mom, I'm the one. You know what I'm saying? And then she's, you know, and then the layers that she's not just a doctor, but she's a, you know, obstetrician at like a you know, like a Planned Parenthood type situation.
Right.
And like, in whatever that, like, this, like, so there's so much, like, I appreciated the way the movie keep the complexities of the life of all of these people were things that mattered, right? And we're typically, especially in the creative movie, in the movie space, and even in the movie going space, we are not afforded the opportunity for folks to think like, oh yeah, you know, he's stressed out because he's worried about, you know, his mom, or his, you know, his books is failing, and like he always supposed to be successful, and uh you know, the brother's a plastic surgeon, and he, you know, dealing with accepting, you know, his sexuality, as it were. You know what I'm saying? And you know, doing a little extra with the substance use. I don't know if that part had to happen, but he probably was already using substances anyway. You know what I'm saying? But like, it's a lot of stuff happening, right? And and none of it is stuff that to me is like far fetched. Like, it's all
Right.
things that I
Right.
can, as a man of a certain age, can relate to. Being like, yo, what's the plan for when, you know, my mom's, it's just not good for her to be not in a house where someone could check on her every day. You know what I'm saying? Being concerned about, you know, whatever your chosen profession, and brushing up against the limits of it, especially for him as a writer, being like, I'm writing all, like, when he well, I'll say that for later, because there's a lot of funny stuff in there. And this, just for the record, this is a bit spoiler. You had a month, you know what I'm saying? So if I tip a hat to some shit you ain't here, go watch the movie, you know what I'm saying, before you before you listen to the rest of this podcast, because I can't protect you. But
But I can I just say real quick, I think your point about like what was the biggest challenge they had? It wasn't because they was about to shut down the rec center down the street.
right. It was like,
Right.
we're about to
Like,
lose the house.
yeah,
They
it
taking the
wasn't
balloon
right. And
payment on
even
us.
losing the house and reverse mortgages was more. I mean,
Right.
those are more just like pedestrian decisions that people make in families versus like a social thing that's happening down the street and the cop killed a black kid, and how are you responding to it? And like, again, these kind of framings as the very challenged or the saint that's like saving people. And what I really liked about it was, in that context, it wasn't like saints or sinners.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had like a thing they were dealing with just as part of life. And again, to center us in that kind of way, I thought was really important.
Yeah. And but just to backtrack a little bit for folks that may not know, I mean, the ethos or the center that when you watch the trailer, especially, is, you have Monk, who is a writer, a well-regarded writer, right, critically acclaimed, so to speak, maybe not particularly financially successful, which, my understanding of the world of writing is a lot of that. Like, you write a lot of good stuff, but you maybe don't make, everybody don't make super bajillion $1 million. But then also the reality is him as a creative and a black creative person, like going to conferences and stuff and like barely getting any attention. When he has when they had an argument where they put him on sabbatical or whatever from the school, and him and the other dude start arguing, and he's like begging on it, like, he's like, well, at least I sold something. And he's like that piece of basically saying his work was hot trash. Like, that whole interaction was fantastic. But also the way, you got Monk, who, he's not he's not like an imposing figure, right? But they totally had like 3 whole people in the room to like have this conversation with him. Right. Like on the other side of the table, like, oh, maybe we got to tell this black man he needs to take a break. Now he did go hard on the sister in the class who was, trying to, apply, I mean, it creates a very interesting space to be in a room as a black man. This was in regard to the N-word. So, you watch the movie, you'll know what we're talking about. And like her being the source of the person being like, I don't want you to say that word around me. And it being kind of like, you bugging. We are in a writing class. We are going to talk about what was what's on the page. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's so much happening there. But it's also a very, I could see how somebody could end up, in an office in a meeting, especially from the seeming that the snapshot we get is that, and it's revealed through the story that, again, he is a person that is kind of difficult to kick it with. You know what I'm saying? Erica Alexander's character, for everybody that Cousin Pam was the cousin you was trying to holler at on the Cosby Show.
Shout out to Cousin Pam shout out to Southwest. She from Southwest, you know that?
Yeah, I thought so, right?
Yeah, she from Southwest. Shout out to Eric Alexander. You know what I mean?
Eric Alexander's character when he snapped at her about the book, it was just like, oh, like, damn, bro, Monk, like, chill out, man. You kind of wilding, man. Like she wasn't trying to control your life, right? But like, he is this dude that is, as much as he is, a sympathetic figure in terms of being the center of the story. Again, as you said, he's not like a saint. He's not without error. He's not perfected. The stuff that gets revealed with him and the siblings is heavy. But before we get off into that, what did you think about sort of the interaction with him and Issa Rae's character in terms of like the young author who he had static with, but it was almost like he was also sort of curious, at least to me, of like, wait a minute, well, how do you see what you've written? It's like he definitely like came when they have that interaction. It's like he came like he was ready for blood almost. Like, yeah, I'm about to like set it off. And then it was like he got pushed back, kind of like, oh, wait a minute. What did you think
Oh
about
man,
sort of
I
their
thought that I had to say I thought that was kind of one of the most impactful, powerful parts of the book, and I mean the movie, and I think it indicated this challenge that a lot of black people, and I'm sure, other original people find themselves in positions as gatekeepers. Again, kind of going back to this concept of black excellence, of like, what are we writing about ourselves? How are we projecting ourselves? What is the sum total of the story? And I think Monk was indicating kind of like this take in the aesthetic of blackness that was not defined by us in what some may call challenging and compromising situations.
Mhm.
And I think the interaction with Issa Rae, even though she was not maybe from that environment, I think there's also that underlying thing in our communities and in our leadership of like, how do you speak for the voices of people who you may not be? And in writing, that may come out that you may be using vernacular that is not your own. In some way, in some senses, it's people representing ideas and concepts of experiences that they haven't had. Um, how do you represent that? So I think to your point, Monk, of being like you're utilizing this vernacular to be successful, and then her pushing back about you being a gatekeeper of the of a perception of a people, and wanting us only to be seen in a certain light.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really, really good part of the dialogue, because I think it does permeate a lot of black conversations in ways we don't discuss,
Mm-hmm.
about the ways we want to be seen and the white gaze and the impact of the ways we want to be seen as far as it pertains to white gaze.
Yeah, yeah, and it was like I've been trying to go watch it again because I wanted to when she because in some ways she basically kind of lands in the base of like why you worried about them any like if I wrote any like it doesn't almost doesn't matter what I had wrote. Like if I had wrote a whole different story that they probably would might possibly like not like it for the same reasons. The my interesting other footnote watching the movie, because there's parts of it where I realize like I'm in Oregon. So when I went to theater, there weren't a lot of black people there at the theater that I saw it at. I don't know for sure if there was other black people besides us. Um, but there was things in there in terms of the overall. Oh, I guess I should say this part because for some people listen they really may be out the loop and they may have consigned this movie to the I'm not gonna go watch that. So the crux of the story is that Monk in a fit of rage, basically bangs out this sort of like highly stereotypical, and like for him, like I'm going to give you the thing you seem to want. Story about like basically like a reformed or released or trying to change his life or I don't know, tell his story like arch criminal black man that like the ghetto and the struggle and the hood is taking me down and the like all of the things, which was actually was a fantastic set of scenes with Keith David and then he's like, wait, what am I about to do right now? Like,
Oh yeah.
I would have loved to see more Keith David if there was a way to get that to happen. Um, and then in order to and he submits this because he needed to submit something, and the same publishers who weren't interested in his other, work were like, "Oh my goodness, we have to have it." And then he's kind of develops this whole fake persona around it, and mayhem ensues. I guess we could say. I also enjoyed his interactions with his manager, editor manager dude, and like their kind of dynamic of like, man, y'all know, the game we in, man. Like, come on, just give me something. You know what I'm saying? And then being Now that, I thought they went a little extra with the he's a fugitive, and but it was always like. But the thing I was getting to was there were things within the structure that I like, because someone may get the impression reading this or even listen to our dialogue or even hearing those points that there was space for other people to be in on the joke. You know what I'm saying? And like, so I
Right.
was sort of at times listening, kind of the way when you go to a play or something, you're like, are they laughing at the right parts of this? And like, there was stuff in there where it was like, oh yeah, they like people in here are also getting, there's like things that they're picking at, within the experience and the behavior, within our society that is like, yeah, them people do be full of shit when they do that. Or those people ain't cool when they do that. Or, like, yeah, that's, um, it's a challenging thing, as I guess, whatever midway creative person, you create something and you feel like a certain way about it and you want other people to feel a way about it, and then you got to realize sometimes like you have no control how they feel about the thing that you created, right? Like, so if you thought you wrote the illest 16 to 32 bars about the Black Panther Party, and everybody's gonna go out and want to like feed some kids and say the community after you lay that bar down. And then later people will be like, yeah, man, like that one part when you was talking about grits, man, I really love grits. My grandma used to make me grits. And you'd be like, nah, but what about the other? I mean, I love your grandma, but what about the other part? We'll go out and say the community and like free the people. And it's like, not so much. I'm not so much into that part. Right. Like, you don't have that control over the way other people accept what you're doing. And I think for a person like Monk, it's like, they say throughout the thing, it's like you were brilliant. Like, and then you have this and so you could like do anything by our accounts. And that could be frustrating when you have that level of like, I can do anything, and you're like, well, why don't people like my stuff the way I'm doing it? And it's like, well, because we don't like that stuff. You know what I mean? But still doesn't mean you're bad. It just means we don't like it. You know what I mean? Or not enough of us like it, to the degree, that you're looking for.
Well, and I think that's the point about the white gaze, right? Like, which again was to me the broader context, like where you see all the kind of funny clips, right, in the movie. It's this like you're writing books, and you're writing, and people aren't like jumping on it. But then when the Issa Rae character does the book or using a particular Black vernacular, like people are all on it, right? And so this idea of like how white people are constantly engaging in certain parts of our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean when there's certain parts of our experience that are engaged because it's raw and gripping, right? And then Monk kind of representing that, like, but we can be elevated. Look, I'm writing about shit, and there's no Black person in the book, right? But I'm Black, so I wrote it. And they're like, no, I want to hear like the Black experience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that kind of tale is an interesting one because it does kind of connect to even like, okay, what does a gaze of a broader society identify as what's acceptable and what's thrilling even versus what does a community that's producing a representative art see as gripping? You can see it in music, you can see it in any kind of form. If somebody's like, kind of in some ways, it's like it's not like the Yasin Bey Drake conversation, but kind of like we're producing this kind of high elevated art, but you like the simplest form of the art.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I'm producing this level of writing, but you like the level of writing that feeds into base stereotypes. And then never having the critics or never having the usually white power structure identify why they like it so much. Right? And his challenge with that. And I think, again, artists and community builders and a lot of people always have a challenge with like, okay, why is this thing you want to talk about education? Right? Why is the thing you want to talk about building a house? Right? So, but people will identify that that's what people want to pay for. So they'll talk about building houses because that's what people want to pay for. versus like it never gets interrogated. They're like, why is that your thing? You know what I mean? Like we talked about before, like George Floyd gets murdered and now everyone's like, invest in black businesses. And no one gets to interrogate like why you switched the conversation from state sponsored murder to like economic empowerment.
Yeah. Well, it gets to like the rub for Monk, and that the benefits of like, to the degree that like him only writing a certain way was some sort of expression of his morals or something, or like his essential character. Like there's only so far that gets him in terms of like being able to do the thing he wants, and like where it could be seen as this outlandish, you know what I'm saying? I guess the analogy I would make, at the time when we were making music in the late 90s, and it was like, oh man, you make one of these like snappy samples that everybody know, and you punch it up a little bit, and you shake, rattle, and roll, you might be able to go somewhere, and you might be able to make a lot of money. But me, I'm saying I gotta stay true to my boom bap, ethos, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. And, at some point though, it's also like, I like to go to parties and dance too. You know what I'm saying? I ain't necessarily against dance songs. I just don't necessarily make them. Right. But then like if your intention, if you're not again clear, to me, something I think any not just like creative people, I think anybody needs to do when you assess, like if you're not clear about why you're doing something and you're acting like you're not doing it for the money that you're going to get paid to do it, and you're like, no, I'm doing this because it's it's always been my goal, my dream to like to save lives. So I became a doctor. Also, despite the high cost and other things, there's an economic and a community esteem that is afforded you usually if you are a medical professional, right?
Right.
And it doesn't mean you're just supposed to get the community esteem just no matter how you act, right? But we do kind of go like, oh man, he's cardiologist, man, save people's lives. You know what I'm saying? This is a beautiful thing. Also, if he's a jerk, we might not really want to hang out. We respect that you can fix our heart, but we may not always dig you all like that because you're kind of a jerk. And someone that's in that position may feel that they still should get that like esteem and love for being, I do this thing where I fix hearts. I get in there, I save people in stents and shit. And it's like, yeah, but you're kind of a jerk. So like, we totally respect that you do what you do, but we don't really want to hang out with you because you're no fun to be around. And that's neither here nor there. Some people like you, I'm not. And when those two things rub up against each other, it can be very difficult for the person in that position to maybe pick up that it's like, oh, they're not like unappreciative of my like what I do. Because to them, that's all together, right? Like the identity right. of themselves is the whole package. And you're like, no, we love the medical thing you do. I don't want to have a beer with you because your opinions about sports are whack. And so I'm going to not hang out with you to do that. But I'm totally going to talk to you when I need to get, my get my medical updates and stuff, right? The other note I wanted to touch on again, I think, was because like the movie itself, if you watch the trailer, right, like you may think that this is going to be an ongoing story about, really, quite frankly, about like white folks, like constant jokes about white folks in his book. And then you get into the movie and it's all like he, at least to me, there's a play on sort of the idea that like the movie has you thinking you're going to do one thing, and then you basically are, you dropped into this family drama. You're dropped into this, processing, unresolved stuff that happens, and quite frankly, sometimes happens, especially for Black folks, along the pathway of trying to get to that at least this concept of Black excellence and control. So you have this, father who's a doctor. So at the time frame that his father is a doctor, and I think his father was actually a cardiologist, if I remember right.
Right.
Like, which would be a pretty esteemed role for someone to be, not a unknown factor, but probably wasn't a lot of Black cardiologists in the Boston area in their time frame. So they live a very upper class life, have a living care, housekeeper, care person that is now kind of care person to their mother. These are three middle-aged folks who clearly have lived a very stable existence, financially, economically, right? But the other side of what may have come with that, for the father, who you don't totally, you find out that the father killed himself, and you're given enough to know that there's secrets and there's stuff that's happened that is sort of the casualty of the father's success, almost, right? In terms of being a car, like this economic and civic success came with this personal, interpersonal, family cost, and ultimately some set of circumstances where he takes his life. And that's a lot to think about in the process, and to happen with a family. To me, I get to say very little. To say less, like that's a lot. That's a serious situation, and a lot of people's families got secrets and shit. You got that aunt don't come around no more, or the cousin that something will talk. We don't talk about this one family member, and maybe somebody one day clues you into why. Maybe they don't, and you just, either depending on the size of your family, at least you just left to sort of go, well, I know this person existed. I don't really know what happened. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why whatever they were going through was whatever they were going through. But the fact that I didn't have access to understand it. And it's very rarely, the movie puts you in this place where it makes everyone deal with that idea that you have this this remnant of whatever stuff was happening with the father. And it's not necessarily that he's I don't know. I don't think it tried to paint him as a sympathetic figure, but it paints it as everyone else was impacted, positively necessarily by the economic realities of him being a cardiologist, but the other stuff is not a guarantee of well-being and happiness just because he had this economic.
And that's why I said that, the limits of Black excellence, right? If you're asserting that a member of your family doing really well and creating a good part of their life, that is necessary but insufficient for the broader wellness, and how Monk's disconnection because of the relationship with his father versus the other ones, and how that connects. And again, wrapping all of that in just, here's a family, and then here's how two members of the family, because I would argue that his brother took what he got from it and then responded to the world in different ways than Monk did, but it was a response coming out of the family. Mm-hmm. Right. And so how do you engage with the broader world based upon the things that happen in your life? And then how does that shape, especially when you're creating art, of framing how you want a people to be seen? Right. And again, like I said, I think we all grapple with that in ways that, when we talk about, the things we say, don't let the family down, or, make Black people proud, all these different ways we have to talk about the role of the individual to the collective. And then you might have a different person that may be trying to express the voices of those who may not have been heard. And what does that look like? And how is that expressed? And I think resolving that tension, and not even resolving it, but engaging that tension, is a part of the constant conversation in Black artistic life, and then by some degree, even Black political life, as far as who and what's being represented. Mm-hmm. How are people being engaged? What's being seen as the standard? Can something be seen as Black without it being a problem therein? So, I think they set out there some really big concepts, which is one of the reasons I really liked the movie, because it didn't kind of give you this linear thing for you to think about when it's over. there's like a broad set of concepts
Mm-hmm.
to think about. And one of the other ones was this idea of like even intergenerational love, like when are people finding love? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And the housemate, like the person, when she's finding love at a certain point in her life, right?
Yeah.
And finding that and getting married at 50 something or 60 something. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Right? Like, because a lot of us, if we're framing when do people get married, and they get married in their 20s and 30s, and but this person is getting married to a fellow who's been interested in her in her 60s. And how do we celebrate that? And how do we all come together to support that? And so I think it just provided some food for thought in ways that I don't think we've kind of given that enough thought. Again, because the movies sometimes have to be either really funny with a smart idea at the end, or they have to be challenging with some funny things in the beginning, like versus like, okay, this is just frankly a normal family with big ideas that leave you to think about it, which is why I think it's being so recognized.
Yeah.
That it does that.
Yeah, and I thought that the like hitting that note, because it definitely, and I think I listened to an interview, I think it was for Vanity Fair's podcast with Jeffrey Wright, and even about that piece in the movie where Lorraine and Maynard getting married, and it was really the part I love about that is Clifford Ellison, Sterling K. Brown's character, cussing out the neighbor with when they go to the pods at the sister's ashes, and he starts asking about permits and shit, and he's like, man, don't you even come over here and ask me about no goddamn permits. He just starts going in on him. That was very as I would say, traditionally African American in terms of like, we are behind our house, we are on the ocean. Don't be asking me nothing about what we doing right now. We're having this is a sacrament, you know what I mean? But also being in that same place, to celebrate the love, you know what I'm saying? And that love is not bound, you know what I'm saying, by time, really, you know what I'm saying, in a sense. Because some people can be like, well, what's the point? Getting married when you whatever age? Like, because they like each other. Because they love them two people dig each other. And they like, yo, we ready to go ahead and do this thing. You like, you know what I'm saying? And this is what we want to be doing, with our lives right now. And
right.
So to have all of that happen, right? Because and this is where I think I was trying to go earlier about the title, is that like all these different aspects of our community's life that typically you don't get to have a movie about. Right? Because there's always movies. There's lots of movies I ain't watched where it's like Breaking of the Winds or something. And you're like, well, what's that movie about? And it's about some sort of like a sister going home to deal with her father's passing and like family secrets. And it's like, why am I watching that movie? And then, some of the movies, when you start watching them, you're like, oh, this is kind of a good story. That's crazy. Oh, that's crazy. That happened to them. Oh man, look at this. Where the cousin at? Right. And like the human dramas, but we don't always get to go to have a movie where it's just a human drama and like the police. I mean, that's why I really loved about the ending, splicing. And again, like I think where it pulls or pushes folks who are tuning in and really listening to the story to like also experience within there, like, yo, y'all want this to end in this like mayhem because it's us. And I hope that people, when they get to that part, kind of maybe feel like the body conflict when they're like, oh yeah, that feels like a good way for it to end with the police shoot him because they think he's a fugitive. It's like, no, that's not good.
Right.
Like, we don't need to see that. Like, but he gets the, him and sort of the meta figure of him and Sterling K. Brown, who are these two accomplished, black actors to like ride off at the sunset to kick it in California, where they ride off set. It's like, yo, that's like, I mean, for a lot of us and for most of us, a lot of our the things that are great about life is having those opportunities to ride off with your partner and like have a great day. Like do the work or the thing that you do, and then go like, yo, I'm gonna get with my mans, man. We're gonna go to what's name, we're gonna get some veggie sandwiches or some hummus. We're gonna be at the coast, it's gonna be popping. Like, it's not all this wrestling with the oppressive nature of our experiences. Like, it's like, no, that's like, joy is going to your auntie's, her and her, she got with her. They loved each other since high school, but their lives went different ways. But now they together at 62. We're gonna go over there. They're gonna make some mac and cheese and stuff, and
Right.
it's gonna be some Bobby Blue Bland playing and all. Yeah, I mean, and we just gonna be happy. Like we're gonna be happy
Man,
for the
Bobby
whole
Blue
after.
Bland.
We're gonna be happy for the whole afternoon, right? Like that stuff is a bigger part of, at least to me, I think most of our lives, but we don't always treat it like that's special, right? Like that's something to talk about. That's something to center a story around. Is maybe the stuff you got to go through to have those joyous moments that you got to deal with this other stuff. Um, so
And that's the normalcy. That's the normalcy I'm talking about, like centering us in very normal ways, that are not so based in our collective trauma. Now, if they got individual trauma, all of that individual trauma, right? But I'm talking about like collective trauma, of being Black, and even if he has to navigate the collective trauma conversation with the white gaze outside,
yeah,
right? And how they feel, like the story of the Black man who's like, uh, you know, on the run, right? Like that's spicy, right? Like, but the normalcy of writing a story is like that's real regular. But this idea of this person writing this gripping tale while on the lam from the Jake,
right.
like that's the thing, right? Or if it's Issa Rae's character, like the sister who is well spoken from Winter Wellesley, telling the story of a struggling Black woman and her
He lives
family.
in the ghetto.
Right, we
It's a
lives in the
crazy
ghetto.
name.
Like, ooh, this is gripping. You know what I mean? So I think it checks a lot of us. It checks a lot of us on what are we projecting, what are we calling art, right? Like I think it does bring to bear sometimes. What are we really calling art? And I think about, not trying to be a curmudgeon, but I do think about even like modern day hip hop and, what are we calling art? Like at some point, if we're telling the story of the neighborhood, but if it's not being told any differently than someone else's, what is it, right? Like at what point has it become strictly for consumption, right? And it becomes strictly for consumption because somebody else was able to do this and it provided an economic way out, right? And where do you get this space of when you're producing art, knowing that the art you're producing or will be able to produce is like a economic financial way out of your conditions. So I just think those are again some of like the bigger things that to me your left will have to grapple with. And I will say one thing, like even our listeners, like and any of our listeners, some of our white listeners, like if you get the urge to try to ask somebody Black after the movie's over what they think about it, don't do it. Because that's the whole shit about the movie.
That's the whole
so
point.
I was accosted. So literally, it couldn't have been crazier. And to your point, we're in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, while the MSA is pretty white, the city of Pittsburgh itself is 24-25% Black. So not a place where you're not gonna find no Black folks. I'm in the movie, me and the other Black person was Damon Young and his wife, right? So as the movie's over, a very belligerent white man in the back is laughing and doing all that the whole day. He says, "Hey, can I stop you for a second?" I said, "No, you can't." He was like, "What you think of the movie?" I thought it was lacking in some places. And I thought to myself, God damn, this is like you just watched a movie about the perception of Blackness in the white gaze. And then you just told me what you thought about how a Black movie was produced about Black people in the white gaze and your white gaze.
Right. What you thought was missing.
What you thought was missing.
Like nobody cares what you think is missing, dog.
That's the point. Like the point of this is what you think is missing sometimes bastardizes and messes up stuff.
Oh.
Like let's just keep it a bean. Sometimes, not well-meaning people and their perception of what's missing makes it actually worse. So yeah, to any my white brothers and sisters, if you get the urge, just fight the urge. Don't do it.
Just don't
do it.
Is and I've just a concept I've I mean, I learned from just a lot of different work, but so just sit with that feeling in your body and don't say nothing. Like drive home, maybe get out a piece of paper and write your thoughts down on a piece of paper, but don't text your black friend or your homie, y'all might be really close, whatever the case may be, and get their opinion. Now, if they initiate a conversation with you about it, feel free. But otherwise, keep it to yourself. Because it's so much happening in that story, and I definitely would like to watch it again. And I would love to watch it again because with some other black folks, I got a mix. I haven't got a lot of opinions. I mean, it's just people who have seen it, but I haven't had a chance to like debrief it. This is the first time I've had to debrief somebody that didn't live in my house. But the our house, just in case anybody try to read something into that. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so much there that are beats that are resonate with me that are important to like what I'm dealing with in life, right? That may not be, the top of the list, for definitely for somebody who's outside of like my direct lived experience. And so I would ask you just kind of like, you keep that to yourself right now. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we'll bring it up later. Man, so with that, I would say, I would encourage you while you have the opportunity to go and like actually see the film and enjoy it, because I did, and I'm going to watch it again. And just as an additional footnote, Corey Jefferson, the director, also was a writer producer on The Good Place, if you've ever watched that show, and The Watchmen, the joint that was on HBO. Just in terms of some of his creative bona fides, you know what I'm saying? I enjoyed it. Good job by you, Corey Jefferson. I will watch it again. You know what I'm saying?
Good job, Jam. Good job.
So with that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we'll wrap that convo up and say, unless it's almost good for the order. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, iMajestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Old Head podcast, and you can support the podcast by listening, by rating and subscribing wherever you're listening, and by sharing far and wide on the internets. You can also support the podcast by becoming a patron. You can just search Justice Raji on Patreon and sign up. Every little bit helps to offset the cost to make this happen. In addition, you can still go to the Etsy shop and purchase a sweatshirt, or if you go to AskYourOldHead.com, there's still one sweatshirt listed up there, even though it's, let's say, last year's style. So get it while it lasts. In any event, thank you for listening, and enjoy. Peace.